Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what is up? What's going on? Hey, howdy. My name is Brian Anthony Davis. Alongside me is Shannon White. And if you're wondering what in the blue heaven am I doing here on this show because I gave it up about 5 weeks ago or so, no, I am back and better than ever for one night only, as our good friend Daniel J is out on some personal business. We're not going to say what that is, but hopefully we are going to have a lot to celebrate next week on this show, Shannon White. And I'm not talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers draft picks. Shannon, what's going on?
Well, it's awesome to have my buddy Bad back.
Yeah,
I've missed you. I told you today, I said, I've missed our conversations and our witty banter. Now, I've heard a rumor that you're just running on fumes right now and a lack of sleep, and you're full of Juju Bees and Joe Cola. Is that true?
Joe Cola. I have not. Juju Bees I don't do. And the reason being is, so my daughter, this was about 6 years ago, and Halloween, and she had Juju Bees in there, or dots. I think they were dots, the same thing. And I'm like, oh, I better check this candy, because I'm always checking the candy to make sure it's okay that they're not being poisoned. No, I'm just glutton. I want to check the candy. I'm like, oh, these Reese's cups, I heard there's a recall on them.
Yeah.
So I lost a crown on the Juju Bee. And so I go into the dentist, and they're like, you had a crown ordered for a year and a half, and that exact crown, and you never came and picked it up. So we have it. I'm like, well, hey, I screwed up in reverse.
It worked out.
Yeah, so it's great to be on with you once again, Shannon. We need Tony too.
Yep.
But I miss that guy too. I miss the 3-pack. I love being here. I miss the live chat here. I know I'm in live chat on other shows. FFSN is Fans First Sports Network is really taking off, and that Jeff, Dave, and I have duties on FFSN, and we were doing a live, actually not live, but we were doing a mock draft for all of the FFSN affiliates, which you can check that out here on Steel Curtain Network. A lot of your guys from SCN are on there too, doing some picks, taking care of some stuff, but I was editing, I was doing that show, and what I thought was going to be a 1-hour show turned out to be a 12-hour production. And I put no, you don't have to listen to it for 12 hours. It's not 12 hours. It's just me producing the 1-hour show took 12 hours. And my wife always makes fun of me. She's like, Brian, you think everything takes 10 minutes, and it doesn't. I'm like, oh, that'll take 10 minutes. But it's like painting the garage. It's not going to take 10 minutes. So that's just who I am as a dude. I think everything's going to be easy. And then I'm like, 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:02 is when I went to bed. And by the end, I was just like, I was having some trouble. So with that being said, it's great to be here. Once again, Daniel J's not here. He will be back next week in his shades. In fact, I feel like we should be wearing shades in tribute to my good friend. And, once again, hopefully everything works out, and we have a lot to celebrate next week. I'm talking cigars, if you know what I mean, but I'm not going to go into too much there. So Shannon, let's do it. It is draft week. I know this is one of our favorite weeks. We love it. No, we work like madmen. We're going to work like madmen all this week. And with FFSN, we're going to be working even more. But Shannon, are you excited?
Oh, this is one of my favorite weeks of the year. For any football purist, if you're a fanatic like we are, this is the week that could just change your franchise's fortunes for the next decade. You Steelers hit it out of the park this week, and they've already got a solid base to build off of. This could be a huge week for the Steelers and for us fans.
I really think so. Now, let me ask you this, because you and I are roughly the same age. You've got me by maybe a year. But what's the first draft that you remember? Now, look, don't say 1974, the great draft of 74. I know you don't remember that. The first coverage. Now, I know drafts, like I was following in the newspaper the 1983 draft, hoping they get Marino, looking at all of that. But that's not what I remember. I'm talking about draft coverage when you were you're like, I'm in.
Honestly, for me, it was the 83. And the reason why is because I thought for sure that Marino was just going to step right in for Terry Bradshaw. He was the hometown kid. I liked watching him play for the Panthers, and I thought he would be perfect in Pittsburgh. So,
did you watch it though?
No. See, back then, we had 3 channels.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to watch it. So what I had to do, now this is dedication here, man.
It is.
I had to call the local newspaper in Bluefield. And I would call ever so often and say, what was the last pick? And the guy knew me well. And he was like, okay, it was this guy. And it was that. So when it come up time for the Steelers, and he told me the pick, I said, what? Who? Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. So he's like, okay, now you know who they picked, so don't call no more. Because I was pestering him. Because I was not even quite a teen yet.
You're probably about 12, yeah.
Yeah. And I was so disappointed. Then it was the next day in the paper I got to see, and I still didn't know who it was. Because back then you didn't have, Wi-Fi and the internet to look it up. I was distraught. I'll be honest with you. So that's my first draft memory.
Did you have a beard back then at 12?
No, I think at least 14 before I had the beard.
I can imagine. And one of my favorite things, I love Shannon White like a brother. I love to do my Shannon accent. I can hear you calling up the newspaper. All right, who'd the Steelers pick in the 4th round? Like, Shannon, go away.
Yeah,
oh, come on.
I loved West Coast during that same time frame because I liked Reggie Jackson. So Reggie Jackson, when he went to the Angels, that was out in the West Coast. So I would call at different hours, if I could catch anybody and say, because they had the ticker, they could tell me what was happening. And so they knew me very, very well. There was even a couple of elderly women in our neighborhood that loved baseball like I did. So they would call me and ask me, had I got any updates on what was happening if like our team was on the West Coast.
That's awesome.
So, but I give those newspaper men a real gratitude this many years later that they tolerated me calling them.
I was the guy that I did the same thing, but I called the local radio station all the time. I was requesting songs half the time, but local radio stations knew me as early as 12 because I was that kid. So, hey, let's do it. Let's talk about this. We got to talk about the big press conference today. That is the big, big news for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you're looking at the NFL total, we got to talk about this trade today. This is a trade that's been happening for, I'm not kidding you when I say this trade's been happening for probably about 6 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And so Aaron Rodgers is officially a Jet. The big part of this deal is the fact that the Jets get Aaron Rodgers and a whole suitcase full of psychedelics, and in exchange for they go ahead and they get the 15th pick as well, and they go ahead and get the 12th pick. Excuse me, no, the Jets do have the 12th pick. Excuse me. So the Jets the Pack will move up 3 spots. No, they have the 13th pick. Texans have the 12th pick. So they'll move up 2 spots, but 2 big spots. They're going to get a 2nd rounder. They're going to get a 6th rounder. But the big thing for me, and if you're a Packers fan, you got to love that 2nd round conditional pick that becomes a 1st in 2024 if he plays 65% of the snaps. So I'm kind of glad that trade's done. It screws up a whole heck of a lot of mock drafts now. But I'm not going back and spending 12 hours and redoing the mock draft. I'm just telling you that right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, they just aren't worth it. I'll be honest. But we knew the trade was coming. It took forever. That it should have took that long. But it's hard to imagine Rodgers not getting at least 65% of the snaps. Unless there's an injury involved.
Yeah.
So basically they got another 1st round pick, next year. But
if you're the Packers and he has an injury, you can't get mad because he would have had an injury on you. Also.
Yeah.
Well, most likely, because that's just the human body. Now I know you're in a different location and you're in a different situation that those injuries might not happen if you're there. Because I was talking last week on my show Bad Language, I'm like, the Steelers in the 8th round or the 7th round in 1987 could have taken Bo Jackson. And if any other team takes Bo Jackson might not get injured, or Bo Jackson gets injured worse in a different play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's space-time continuum. You really can't. But that's all we're going to talk about with the Green Bay Packers. The only thing about Green Bay right now is GB, and those are the same initials as our good friend Jeffrey Benedict.
Yes.
All right, so let's get it on. Big press conference today. And just like always, we knew this was going to happen. If you do want to check out, you have to check out. Just go to behindthesteelcurtain.com and check out the transcripts on there. Go to Steel Curtain Network to check out the audio. Dave Schofield put together, just like clockwork. Dave's there. There's a press conference. He's going to go ahead and put out the I call it the translation. They call it the recap. I'm like, we're going to translate it because Mike Tomlin's not going to say much. He's going to talk a lot, but he's not going to say a lot because that's by design. And I love that he does that. But sometimes you got to look into the inner meaning and what it meant. So Omar and Mike took the podium today. And I got to be honest with you, Shannon, I have no clue what was said. So the title of this show is Secrets. Actually, what's the full title of the show, Shannon?
The secret is there is no secret.
And that's a great Tomlinism. I love it. So I'm going to ask you, because I know you paid great attention to it. I've been in a daze half the day, and so I don't know if I know the full meaning. So I'm going to throw it over to you. What is the meaning behind the secret is that there's no secret?
Just the work that they put in this offseason. Tomlin and Khan and Waddle and all the scouts, that you have to have boots on the ground. You got to go to all the pro days. You got to be at the combine. You got to go to, the interviews. You have your dinners. You have your official visits. All that there's no shortcut. So somebody was asking what was the secret, and he said, well, the secret is there is no secret. And we know, like a college coach is great in a living room, as Jerry Maguire said, he could sell it, man. If he could get in that living room, he could sell him. He could sell the university. He could, that's how Tomlin is in these meetings and these dinners. And he builds these relationships. They talked about it today in the press conference. He was very intimate with Robertson and Robertson's family at Penn State when he was coming out. And so they've had a relationship all these years. So when they had a chance to pick him up, with that trade with the Rams, they jumped on board because he has really close relationships with so many of these players. And a lot of them start during this pre-draft evaluation and process during the pro days and the combine. So he was really talking about the relationship that he has built with Khan. Colbert's not around anymore, but it was kind of a smooth transition because Khan learned from Colbert. And they didn't give Waddle as much credit as I thought they might, because a lot of these maneuvers they've made this offseason has had Waddle's fingerprints all over. But they're talking about that, they're telling him, yeah, and sometimes they're like, no, that, we're not going to go that way. But it seems like they've got a really good line of communication there. They've got a solid plan, and they're sticking to it. And one thing, I don't know if you didn't get to see it, but Tomlin put a yard sale up on that 32nd pick.
I know that's
make offers. And so he's super excited about that, having that 32nd pick. He said that was, new for them, and it is. It's very rare. So hopefully they can really get some great value there.
Okay, you have said a lot of things here. The first thing that I'm going to tell you, let's talk about Waddle real quick. Look, he is the assistant. He is valued. They know it. But I like how you mentioned the fingerprints, and everybody thinks because there's Eagle guys here, that doesn't mean it's Waddle's deal. It means that Omar and Mike are coming to him and say, Andy, what's the deal with this guy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not that Waddle has the connection, because if you're a good GM, you have no problem picking up the phone and talking to anybody. And if you're a good salesman, like you said, the king of the living room, like I felt like I was the king of the living room in high school and college with girls' parents because I could schmooze them. I mean, I was less good with the ladies. I mean, I was a dork, but I knew I could schmooze the parents. And so I could be. And so someone was saying, one of our guys on BTSC, actually Steel Curtain Network, his daughter had a date. And he said, "Oh, he's very nice." I was talking to him. I said, "Hey, I was the king of the living room. And then you know all about BAD. And you've heard about the initials BAD and the Mr. 2 a.m. So I was that kid in the living room schmoozing the parents." So basically, it's not Andy Weidel that just because he was there, it's great that he was there, but it's not his fingerprints. It's just the fact that he knows it. If I'm looking at a guy from West Virginia and you know him, everybody's calling up Shannon White to find out. If you're looking at a kid from Hagerstown, Maryland, where I live, you're going to go ahead and give me a call. And you know all about this guy. So that's how it is. But
when I say fingerprints, that's what I mean, is that he has information a lot of times on these players that Khan does not necessarily have, or Tomlin does not have. He knows them personally closer. Like a lot of the guys I was just talking about, Tomlin's relationships that he develops, Weidel has a lot of these connections as well. And it's a joint effort.
Yeah.
And one thing about it too, we know that Weidel knows the round bellies. I mean, he likes the big boys. And he's been really effective in the past at acquiring them for whatever team that he was working for. And I think he's doing the same thing with the Steelers.
Well, that's good news for us. Then he's going to call you and me up.
That's right.
We got those wide bodies. Hey, now here's the other thing you mentioned about the past relationships with Mike Tomlin and players. Have you ever heard Pat McAfee talk about that? He went up to Pat McAfee at the combine and said, "Man, we're not going to be able to draft you, but we'd love to have you." And then he went, when they were playing a game, he went up and basically talked about the conversation they had before. And like McAfee's like, he remembers me? He loved it. You've got guys on this team or affiliated with this team. Possibly they might not have a contract. Carl Joseph, he was one of those guys. That's why he's here, because of that relationship. We were just having a conversation on the preview 2 weeks ago. And the question was, Jeff brought out the question, are the Steelers done? Are they going? And then somebody asked, are they going to bring somebody else in? And our answers was this. If they bring somebody in, it's going to be somebody that Tomlin knows from 3 or 4 years back at the combine. And then they're looking at, they either became available or somebody that they trust. They'll bring it in. Might be a special teamer. It might be not be a guy that you readily know. It's not a guy up on billboards. It's nothing like that. But it's a player that you'll grow to love because he's that blue collar guy. And less than 12 hours later, they signed Tanner Muse. They signed that guy. We had no clue. Well, I'm knocking my headphones off. Excuse me. When you're half Italian, you use your hands. So that's the thing. And he has those relationships, and it's great. So the secret is that there's no secret, but to me, there's a secret sauce, and they know just how to spread it.
Yeah, you mentioned Tanner Muse. That's a guy that I was all on board.
Oh, we were in love with him.
Yeah, and I was like 5th round. Even late 4th, the Steelers really need to look at him because he was a linebacker safety hybrid. Wasn't sure where he was going to get to play, but he had talent. Mind you of a John Lynch type safety, size wise. He was a little bit undersized for linebacker. So, then 3 years later, he's here. So, and the Steelers didn't have to do like the Raiders to give up a 3rd round pick to get him. So those relationships that Tomlin forms is so valuable, later on in that process.
You know what? Evgeny just said mock drafts need to stop. Enough already. You know why I love mock drafts? It's how I study. This is how I know who these guys are. And doing that FFSN draft was great for me because I feel like I know everything about everybody in the first round and a good bit of guys in the second round. And that's
Mhm.
why I do them, so I know who these guys are. Don't take stock in a mock draft. Here's my, and you've known me for a long time. You've heard me say it. I'm going to say it again. There's one simple rule. You never trust a fart and you never trust a mock draft.
Yeah.
and and that's the best way to go ahead and say it. So here we go. What else did you gather from that? I'm seeing on the live chat somebody mentioned that the tight end situation, that it's a deep tight end draft. When they mention that it's a deep draft, they kind of go in that direction, don't they?
Well, it's funny. They mentioned all the different positions. They say they really don't have an area that they've got to really focus on. They've really used free agency, as we've talked about, that they're in a pretty good situation right now, that they can focus on best player available, always with at an area of need. In some picks, obviously, in some positions have higher value. But they were talking and they were listing. They actually, Con mentioned defensive line. See, to me, I don't think the defensive line is as deep this year as it has been some other years. I think there's not too many sure things, and there's some projects there. But they mentioned that. But on down through there, they mentioned tight end, which, as you know, we're all excited about because you just want weapons. It doesn't matter if it's another wide receiver or if it's another top tight end. You just want to give Kenny Pickett and the offense as many weapons as possible. And there's a couple of tight ends in this class. Well, it's a deep class, but there's a couple of them that can be real difference makers and be a real weapon, especially the way Matt Canada runs his offense. So when they said tight end, then everybody started commenting that, it might be considered a tight end.
Let me ask you this, because you just brought up the tight ends, and I was going to save this for later. But falling in line, we talked about Tanner Muse. I remember Anthony Schwartz 2 years ago was my big draft crush. Let's get him in the 5th round, and he goes in the 3rd or he goes in late in the 2nd, and then you never hear from him again. But so let me talk about a guy that I think has been a crush of everybody. Of course, Michael Mayer was first. Everybody was talking about Michael Mayer. You're getting some Dalton Kincaid action, but for my money, all I'm hearing about is Darnell Washington. And the thought of Darnell Washington right now makes me salivate. And I want to follow the Dave Schofield rule. Be careful on how you fall in love with these guys because they end up in purple.
Yeah. Yeah, that sucks. It hurts every time. You know me, I always have my draft crushes, and I write about.
Oh, you've got a million draft crushes every year.
But I always have about 3 that I'm really emphatic about.
You're like Wilbar. You and Wilbar.
No, I'm not that bad. I'm not that bad.
Because you guys have like 600 draft crushes, and when they get drafted in the 7th round, you're like, that's my guy. And then when they're finally good, you're like, I told you.
Well, I have like probably 2 or 3.
You know what?
I have 2 or 3 each round.
No, I'm stopping you. You know what? You're the guy. Let me ask you, NCAA basketball bracket. You fill out 19 on the first day and like probably 100 more the rest of the week.
I didn't even do one this year.
But I bet you have. Shannon White, I bet you have. Come on, don't lie.
I have done a few, but I don't do that many. No. But
you still miss me?
I just want to win, But no, honestly, Washington would be such a weapon in that offense. The way Canada runs it, not only is that extra blocker, but he could attack the seam. He's almost like he's got wide receiver speed, and he would really be able to do a lot of the things if they bring in another receiver. So yeah, I think everybody's excited about Washington.
Let me ask you this, Shannon: Is he pretty close? Could he be the closest thing to Eric Green?
Well, I don't think he has the issues off the field that Green had.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, and we don't know that, and
he don't have a weight problem Green had.
Okay, yeah, but Eric Green, when he was drafted, look out.
Oh, I played with a guy who went to Liberty with him. Some issues and a little bit of a head case, but said that the dude was a freak. He said, when you see him, he's like Charles Barkley when he was playing for Auburn. a guy that big and that heavy shouldn't be able to run and jump like that. And he was right. Green was he was unguardable when he had his head on straight.
That's the thing. Hey, we are going to learn more about Shannon's draft crushes. We are going to learn so much more about not just his draft crushes, but what happened in that press conference today. We're going to talk about it. You can throw it in the live chat. Hey, it is all inclusive. It's kind of like my furlough from prison. I've got 1 day with you guys. I've got 1 hour with you guys. So I'm in. Let's do it. Let's do it right, like we've done every Monday night for the last 3 or 4 years. You got me back, and I'm so glad to be with you. Man, I've missed all you guys. And we're going to ask a question to the live chat because there's a mystery that we've been trying to figure out, and we're going to do that. In fact, we're going to do that when we come back. So stick around.
The worst looking man you've ever seen. There I am on the subway train.
Yeah, we're on that subway train now.
Between two finest girls.
Yeah, you're sitting in between the two finest men you've ever seen. And here we are right now. It's Shannon White. It's Brian Anthony Davis. One night only for right now. You'll see me again. I always said I would be. Daniel J will be back next week. Prayers to Daniel J as he and his family are undergoing something happy, hopefully, and we will have something to celebrate next week. And so prayers that everything goes well with that. So Shannon, we are back. Big things. It's draft week. We're talking about your draft crushes. We're going to answer some questions, any draft questions that you have. We can go ahead and do that. We're wrapping it up because next week we're not talking about what's going to happen in the draft. We're talking about what happened in the draft. But there's been a mystery, and everybody has asked me this, and it's about the live chat, and I don't know the answer. And heck, I'm at the point in my life when I got to 50, my filter started closing, and I'm just like, if I want to know something, I'm going to ask. All right, Afton and Kathy, are you related? That's all I want to know. We both have the name Forward. I just want to know if you're related. So I'm not sure, unless they're the same person, and I don't know. But so we've got to ask that question. So please let us know in the live chat. You've been wondering that, Shannon, haven't you?
That's a good question. I'd honestly not noticed, but then I said, oh, it is. They got the same last name.
Okay, yeah, you're quick to the party, Shannon.
I'm quick.
You know what? I got to say this real quick. My daughter, God bless her, she's doing great in school, but sometimes she has some. She comes up with some things that really confuse me. And we were joking about, we were at scout camp and they had a branding iron that we're not using, but it was for, they were showing us a branding iron. And my daughter said, hey, we should put that on Connor, which is my son. We should put it right on the back of his forehead. And I'm like, the back of his forehead? How do you do that? And now she's mad because I'm telling everybody I think it's funny. So we have the answer. We have the answer. Kathy, one of my favorite all time, the Afton's her daughter. So there we go. We've got the answer. And now we know. Now I thought Kathy was like 30. So I didn't know she was old enough to have a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. So two lovely Forwards. I love them. And and I just did the forehead joke and I wasn't even thinking. So that was close. Hey, let's do this. What are your other draft crushes here? And you can only give us a couple.
Well, you just think I got just so many, I guess.
I know you, Shannon. We've been together a while now. I know you. And now we've got a great relationship that you're my buddy, so I call you out. You call me out. You're not afraid to call me out, and I love it. And if you don't, you know what, like you always say, if you're not picking, that doesn't mean that means I don't love you. If I'm not picking.
Yep, exactly. No, for me, I've had my Creed Humphreys last year, Sky Moore, and the inside linebacker out of Iowa. I really like what the Steelers done this offseason. They cleaned house on the off-ball linebacker position, and they brought in some guys who have the right personality, the attitude, the leadership in Roberts and Holcomb. And I'm really expecting Mark Robertson to be able to be a contributing part of the rotation next year. But I know everybody's wanting a movement guy, a Mac guy who, you know, can cover. And I understand that. But Jack Campbell, guys like him, to me, don't come along every year. So I'm really excited about him. I love his size, his length, his instincts.
Which
and
one
his
is this,
attention.
Campbell or
Huh?
Van Ness? Campbell or Van Ness?
No, it's Jack Campbell.
Jack Campbell. Okay.
Yes. Now Van Ness is somebody who's a project, in my opinion.
That's what Kevin Smith says.
Yeah, he's got a real high ceiling, but he can have a real low floor. You remember Mike Mamula for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Oh, I talk about Mike Mamula, workout warrior. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, not warrior, warrior. Oh,
I think Van Ness is similar in that, you know, if Mamula had really hit and he could have lived up to his combine, he could have been really, really good, but he never was able to. You know, he wasn't that great at Boston College, and it showed that he wasn't that great with the Eagles either. And I think Van Ness has to decide, is he going to be a defensive tackle or is he going to be an edge player? And so it's kind of like Leal last year. Leal is a hybrid. And Tomlin talked about it at the press conference today, that they don't really want, they want kind of positionalist players. They want guys who have the versatility that they can move around in the formation and have that creativity. And that's great. And the Steelers have some now. They got Leal. They have Neal, the guy that they signed, the safety, to Keanu Neal.
Keanu.
Place.
Like Keanu, he was named after Keanu Reeves, wasn't he?
I don't know if he was
yes.
or not, but
yeah, our very own Jim Wexell.
Yeah, he
mentioned that on the show.
He was brought in to replace Edmonds, and he is kind of your smaller, you know, off-ball linebacker, box safety, similar to Edmonds, but he doesn't have that same athleticism that Edmonds had. But the Steelers are going that direction. Tanner Muse, another guy who's a hybrid that they can use in a lot of different ways. So, but I don't think you spend the 17th pick on a guy without a defined position who's kind of a project. So I'm not interested in Van Ness in the first round. Now, for that matter, I'm not interested in Jack Campbell in the first round because I think you could get any of the off-ball linebackers in this draft in the second round, whether it be Jack Campbell or Trenton Simpson, you know, or Drew Saunders. Those are your top three guys, really. But I really like Campbell because, to me, he plays like a Pittsburgh Steeler.
All right, so let me go ahead and ask you this question. Then I'm going to talk about my draft crushes. And you know what? I'm going to talk about my draft crushes right now. Let's do it. Cornerback. I want a cornerback. I really do. If it has to be with a second pick, I'm fine with that. I would love a first-round corner. You know how I do not subscribe to the fact that the Steelers don't know how to pick a corner. I think that's circumstance more than anything. But with that being said, if Christian Gonzalez falls and I'm there, I'm stiff-arming women and children and men. And, I mean, you could be in a walker and I might knock you over to get that up there. You know, I would be so excited. I'd apologize. I'd pick you up and buy you an Italian ice and I'd apologize. But I would rush up to the podium for him. I think I'm rushing up to the podium for Devin Witherspoon too. And I know Kevin Smith is saying the same thing. And man, you always trust the coach. Mm-hmm. The coach is the guy you trust with that kind of stuff. I would love to have an offensive tackle, but I'm also fine if the Steelers do not pick an offensive tackle in this draft. It will not kill that team if they don't. Mm-hmm. They have slowly become a free agency building offensive line team. Yeah. And we've seen that. So that's not going to kill you there. I think the corner is a big thing. I said on Bad Language a few weeks ago, if they take two corners in the first three picks, I'm happy. If you get Julius Brents and Joey Porter Jr. or Devin Witherspoon and Emmanuel Forbes in the first 3 picks, you were talking about your first draft. My first draft that I really remember, 1987, Rod Woodson, Delton Hall, and Thomas Everett was in that draft too. 4th, he was the safety.
Mm-hmm.
But my gosh, that was a great draft. Go back and look at that draft if you don't know it. So yeah, I would love for them to have 2 corners in this draft. If they get a Paris Johnson, if he falls to you, you grab that guy. But they are not desperate, and you're probably tired of hearing me say that. But the Steelers are not desperate for a pick. I think somebody mentioned in the live chat that they really want to just fix the depth. And I really think they can do that. There's future starters through this draft. Wilbar talks all the time about how this is not a deep draft. To me, it is, because really you're concerned with those first 120 picks, and the Steelers have 4 of them in there, and you get really excited about that. Mike Tomlin talked today about so many things you could do with that 32nd pick. When you're picking number 1, you've got 20 hours to figure out what you need to do with that pick. It's like having the number 1 pick in the draft, because it's the number 1 pick on day 2. You're going to get somebody good. That phone is going to be blowing up. That 412, everybody's going to be dialing it, because if you don't ask, Shannon, you don't get.
Yes.
And you ask, and the Steelers are in a position to ask. When they call, you ask. You say, hey, give me this guy. I can't give you that guy. All right, give me this guy, and this guy, and then we'll give you this. We'll give you this next year. Whatever. You have the ability to throw something crazy out there. It's like that movie Airheads when they said, hey, get us this, and a naked picture of B. Arthur. You can ask for whatever you want, and it doesn't hurt, because if you don't ask, you don't get. Because I tell my scouts, I tell my kids, you ask, because you never know if we're going to say yes. You never know what mood you caught us on. You never know that we've been thinking about it too, and we can make that possible. If you like something enough, you pay to get it. There are desperate teams. This is something that nobody's talked about whatsoever. They're talking about other teams in the first round. Nobody's talked about the San Francisco 49ers. Nobody's talked about the Los Angeles Rams. Nobody's talked about the Miami Dolphins and the Denver Broncos, because they don't have number 1 picks whatsoever, but they might want to sneak back in.
Yes.
They might want to do something. They might want to be able to control their destiny with that number 1 pick in the second round of the draft, or they want to come in at 17. Or you have another team that's, hell, if the Ravens call you up and they're at 22 and they want to move up to 17, fleece them. You just fleece them. Because you have that ability. And I think Omar Khan is that guy. That's what makes him the it guy, because he's got the numbers in his head. He knows, he's like a beautiful mind. Well, what was his name, John? Gosh, I'm forgetting his name. He's a West Virginia guy, right?
Yeah, I can't think of his name either.
Gosh, why do I not know that? It's on the top of my head. But all I'm saying is that's where you're at here. You can do anything. So with that being said, anything else from that press conference that just really slapped you in the face?
Yeah, I was enjoying what you were saying, and I was trying to make sure I remembered one thing, because you said nobody's talking about the teams that didn't have a first-round pick. Well, that 32nd pick is usually the last pick of the first round. So some team like the Niners, they planned on being in the Super Bowl and winning it. I'm sure they might want that 32nd pick, because that was part of their plan. There's just so much value there. But one thing that Tomlin and them talked about today, Tomlin specifically, people are not realizing the average age of the draft prospects this year is substantially older because of COVID.
Yeah, it's true.
All the 5th year, it's even 6-year guys. Tomlin mentioned it. So he says this is a very deep class that a lot of people are not realizing, because guys played longer. They're more experienced. They're more apt to be ready to come in and contribute much sooner of where they are maturity-wise, not only in their bodies and their minds, but in their experience levels. So when he mentioned that, I thought that was a great point because look, if you look at so many, let's just say the edge position, I've got an article coming out, and he's a edge player from Louisville. He's getting ready to turn 24 not long after the draft. I think he could be an uncut gem. He's a guy that, but if you look at this draft class, so many of these top 120 prospects are over 22. They're 23, 24 because of the pandemic.
Shannon, it happened last year here. Kenny Pickett is 24. He'll be 25 this year. And, people were complaining about that. I'm like, why are you complaining about it? You're not they always talk about the maturity level of males, that they don't their brain doesn't, they normally don't really mature until they're like 25. Well, now you've got a fully matured brain, and you're not dealing with those 3 years, and quarterbacks last a long time. Good quarterbacks last a long time if you keep them healthy. So that's the thing with Kenny Pickett. We saw a perfect example of it last year, and I think they're going to reap the benefits with him being 25 in year 2. And wasn't Josh Allen in that same boat? Wasn't he older?
I think he was only around 22, if I remember right.
Okay, I might be mistaken there. But
no,
the thing is,
Joe Burrows was.
Joe
Burrows was 24.
So you know what? That's one of the few good things that came out of the pandemic. But a lot of people got opportunities because of that pandemic, and they stayed in school because of it. And you're seeing Hendon Hooker.
Yeah,
you're seeing guys like that. He might not be the guy you're looking for, but hey, I remember a certain draft 5 years ago when you had a guy go 32, and it's Lamar Jackson.
Yep.
And we saw another guy go 32 a couple years before that, Teddy Bridgewater.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the guys that talking about Hooker. Well, he might not be a first rounder. He might not be this. Hey, you don't know until you know. And that's the bottom line to the whole thing.
One thing you mentioned about Kenny Pickett, and that was a great point. We've seen it in his leadership. We've seen it in his ability to handle adversity, because things did not go smoothly at first at all. And we've seen it how he handled the huddle and the respect factor that he got. Like when Ben come in, Ben did not get that. And he come to a much older team, but he was nowhere near as mature as a player or an individual as Pickett was. But if you've noticed this offseason, Pickett has been the one leading the offseason workouts.
Yep.
Pickett is the one leading. I mean, he's come in substantially heavier. I've heard anywhere from 10 to 12 pounds. And he looks thicker. And he's been putting in the work. And I don't know if you read or heard guys like the new defensive lineman, Brendan Fahuku.
Yeah.
He said the first person that called him after he signed with the Steelers was Pickett. Now, that's incredible leadership from your second-year quarterback.
And you might not be doing that at 23. So that's why this age doesn't matter as much. I've especially when you haven't. I don't know what the average. I think it's still 5 or 6 years. An average career for a player is right around 5 or 6. And if that's the case, then my gosh, if you're a quarterback and you're coming in at 24 and you're playing until you're 30 or 31, you expect them to play so much longer than that. Yeah. But in this day and age of the NFL, you're not keeping that player as much like you used to. They're in another uniform. So that's an interesting thing. Shannon, we're ready to get on out of here. Do you have any final thoughts before the draft? Do you want to make a proclamation about the draft? Do you have a guy that you want picked? Who do you want picked? And don't do the old, I don't think this is what they're going to do. I want you to do both. Who are they picking and who do you want?
I think they'll end up taking Darrell Wright, the tackle from Tennessee. Not who I want.
I hope not, because
no, not who I want.
No, because his name's Darnell.
That's who I think they're going to take. Who I'd like for them to take. Huh?
I want Darnell Wright, not Darrell.
Oh, Darnell, yes.
I'm
And,
messing with you.
But if I want the best value at 17.
No. Don't stop with the best
No.
value.
I told you. I told
want
you
a
I thought
name.
they would take.
Okay, I want a name though.
I know. I told you I
You're
thought
not
they would take.
Schofield. You
But
can't
I
beat around
had
the
to
bush.
I had to say that who I want the best value. So for me, looking at who might be there at 17, and people's going to hate it, but I like Jackson Smith, the Jigba, the wide receiver out of Ohio State.
You want to pair him with his brother.
Well, in Pittsburgh, yes. I want him. I want the best guy. He's the best receiver. Therefore, I think that'll make him the best value at 17 if they stay there.
Is there a Smith and a Jigba that plays hockey too? And then we can have one on the Pirates, one on the Penguins, and we can have
maybe
one
one
on the
in the
Steelers.
NBA. Who knows?
We don't have an NBA team, so that's the problem. All right,
that's true.
I love Smith and Jigba. I think he's fantastic. I don't think the Steelers can go wrong in this draft unless they go off the rails, and I don't expect them to, because there's so many different ways they can go that we're going to be happy, unless you're a person that doesn't want to be happy. And that's the bottom line to it. I think they're set up for that. You know,
one thing we got to mention, Miles Boykin.
Yes.
Just signed, back with the Steelers today, 1 year.
So I saw Ian Mungo put that. I was looking for it. When was that? When did that go?
Oh, that was just like 2 or 3 o'clock.
Okay. So I missed that coming in. That's a big deal. Very, very big deal for the special teams and the back end of those receivers. That might be one of those positions that they might not take. So, Shannon, with that being said, if I have a draft crush, it's going to be Christian Gonzalez. Don't think that's going to happen. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a guy like Darnell Wright, and I'm happy with Darnell Wright. I'm fine with that, because that's the way they go. But they need to go a corner early. They definitely got to do a corner early. I could see a guy like here's the guy I don't want. For some reason, I don't want Deontay Banks. I don't know enough about him. I live in Maryland, don't know enough about him. But it's time for us to get on out of here. I got to blow out. Hey, we got to thank everybody. We appreciate you so much for being a part of our lives here. Good luck to the Jalamos family. I hope I never really pronounced his last name. So good luck to Daniel J and his family. We're going to hopefully we get some great news, and we're celebrating next week. With that being said, enjoy the draft, Shannon. For all of you in the live chat, we love you. We will talk to you next time. It's not going to be me, but you'll find me anywhere and everywhere. I'm like a hobo. I just show up here and there and everywhere. So we will see you from the Steel Curtain Network. Once again, we love you. And just when you think you've got all the answers, Shannon,
we keep changing the questions.
Give me that beautiful woo, my friend.
Woo!